Lightning tore across the midnight sky. Through the rain, a wounded German shepherd crawled forward, her belly swollen, her fur streaked with blood. Her name was Daisy. Once a proud police dog, now abandoned, broken, and carrying 6 unborn lives. Every step was a fight. Every breath, a prayer.
What happened here? Is
She
he all right?
collapsed before a dark animal rescue shelter. Rain
know.
washing over a single
I just
photograph
found him like
from
this.
her collar. A little girl's arms wrapped around her, both smiling, once family, now lost. And as thunder rolled above the empty streets, no one yet knew that this dying dog was about to expose a secret powerful enough to shake an entire town. Oak Ridge, Pennsylvania, was a town that time had left behind. Old mills slept along the river, their chimneys black against the sky, and the streets carried the smell of rain-soaked rust. That night, the storm came hard and unforgiving. Thunder rolled through the valley like an old train, and lightning split the clouds in violent flashes. Rain hammered rooftops, flooded alleys, and blurred the faint glow of the last diner still open. Through the chaos moved a lone German shepherd. Her name, unknown to the world yet, was Daisy. 4 years old, her black and tan coat clung to her ribs, her belly round and heavy with unborn puppies. A broken chain dangled from her neck, tapping against the pavement with every trembling step. Her right ear carried a clean V-shaped notch, once a mark of service, now a scar of abandonment. Blood seeped down her leg, mixing with rainwater that swirled along the curb. Every breath rasped like a blade dragged through gravel. Oak Ridge's storm had swallowed the night, but Daisy's instinct kept her moving. She had once been trained to track, to search, to find. Now she searched for something she couldn't name, maybe warmth, maybe mercy. When her legs finally gave out, she collapsed before a squat cinderblock building at the end of Mill Street. A hand-painted sign read, "Oak Ridge Animal Rescue." The red light of a security camera blinked above the door, indifferent but awake. Daisy's head dropped beside something that had slipped free of her collar, a soaked photograph of a smiling little girl hugging her neck. For a heartbeat, lightning lit their faces, 2 souls frozen in a happier world. Daisy's eyes flickered toward the door marked "After Hours Drop," and then she lay still. Inside, Helen Carter rinsed medical trays under humming fluorescent lights. 58 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, Helen looked every inch the kind of woman who had learned to survive by doing. Her hair, once chestnut, was now streaked with silver and twisted into a practical knot. Her skin carried the soft creases of someone who had worked more with her hands than with words. A chain around her neck held a wedding band, her late husband's. Helen had founded Oak Ridge Animal Rescue 15 years earlier, after a car accident took him and left her searching for meaning. The rescue became her redemption, her discipline, and her way of keeping grief busy. Across the room, Amy Carter, Helen's 17-year-old daughter, labeled medicine bottles with neat but hurried strokes. She was slim, restless, and full of the kind of kindness that always ran ahead of caution. Her brown eyes mirrored her mother's but burned brighter, curious, determined. A streak of blue paint still clung to her hair from earlier when she'd helped repaint the kennels. Animals trusted her instinctively, and Helen often said Amy had a soul that barked in the right language. Near the back door, Ben Parker wrestled with a jammed kennel latch. 34, stocky and strong, he carried himself with the quiet competence of a man who had seen flames up close. Once a firefighter, Ben had left the department after a roof collapse tore his shoulder and took a friend. The loss left him quieter, slower to laugh, but steady, the kind of man who fixed things without needing to be asked. His flannel shirt was rolled to the elbows, revealing scarred forearms and grease-stained wrists. A crash outside made Amy look up. At first it sounded like thunder, but then came a low, drawn-out scrape, metal on cement. "Mom, you hear that?" she asked. Helen froze mid-motion, head tilted. Another rumble, then a faint whimper that pierced through the rain like a plea. She dropped the tray into the sink and crossed to the door. The second she cracked it open, the wind slammed it against her hip, and rain exploded inside. In the wash of light from the doorway, a shape moved. A large dog collapsed against the step, chain coiled around her neck, sides heaving shallowly. "Oh my God," Amy whispered. Helen's training kicked in. "Ben, get towels! Amy, clear the floor by the heater." She knelt beside the animal, pressing 2 fingers to the cold, wet neck. Pulses weak. She's close. Daisy tried to lift her head, but only her eyes moved, haunted, exhausted, still searching for permission to rest. Helen slid her arm beneath the dog's chest. "Easy, sweetheart, we've got you." The shepherd trembled, but didn't resist. Together, Helen and Ben lifted her, heavy as wet sand, and carried her inside. The warmth hit Daisy's skin like sunlight after weeks of cold. They laid her on a clean blanket. Water dripped from her coat, pooling on the tile. Amy crouched beside her, whispering softly, "It's okay, girl. You're safe now." She noticed the torn photo near Daisy's jaw and picked it up. "Mom, look." Helen squinted at the faded picture. A red-haired girl in summer clothes hugging this very dog. For a moment, Helen's stern face softened. "She had someone once," she murmured. "She still does," Amy replied. Ben returned with a portable heater and an IV kit. "You want fluids in?" Helen nodded. "Start with a small gauge, right foreleg. I'll check vitals." She pressed her palm against Daisy's belly. The muscles tightened, hard and wrong. "She's trying to give birth, but something's blocking. Could be a puppy stuck, could be trauma." Amy flinched. "Can she make it?" "If she's lucky," Helen said, already threading the IV line. "If we're fast?" Ben found the vein with the steadiness of experience and slid the needle in. Helen wrapped gauze around the base and let the fluids run. Daisy's chest rose, fell, then rose again, a fragile rhythm clawing its way back. Her fur smelled of wet iron and smoke. "What happened to you, girl?" Helen murmured. She saw the V-shaped notch on Daisy's ear. "Police dog. Maybe military. Explains the chain," Ben said. She chewed herself free. The building flickered as lightning struck nearby, plunging the room into half-light. The generator hummed, old but faithful. Amy grabbed a flashlight and aimed it toward Daisy's face. Her pupils contracted but didn't track. "She's fading." Helen's jaw tightened. "Not tonight, she isn't." They worked in practiced silence. Towels soaked through and were replaced. The heater hummed, the smell of antiseptic mixed with rain sneaking through the cracked door. Amy reached out and brushed Daisy's ear. "You're not alone anymore," she whispered. The shepherd's tail moved, just once, barely a twitch, but enough to make Amy gasp. Ben glanced up. "She heard you." "Then she's still fighting." Helen's voice dropped low, the kind of calm that comes from leading through storms. "Let's give her a name. If she's going to live, she deserves one." Amy looked at the picture again, the joy on the girl's face, the loyalty in the dog's eyes. "Daisy," she said softly. Helen smiled faintly. "Daisy it is." As if the name itself gave her permission, Daisy's breathing steadied. Rain drummed on the roof. Somewhere in the kennels, a nervous terrier barked and fell quiet again. For the next hour, they worked, warming blankets, adjusting fluids, watching the weak pulse strengthen by millimeters. Ben mixed a glucose solution, while Helen cleaned the wound on Daisy's flank. Amy fetched more towels, her hands shaking from adrenaline. When it was done, the three of them sat in the dim light, wet and exhausted, watching the shepherd breathe. Helen leaned back against the wall and exhaled. "I don't know where she came from," she said, "but she's been through hell." Amy held the photo over her lap. "Do you think the girl's still looking for her?" Helen looked toward the door, where rain still whispered against the glass. "If she is, we'll make sure they find each other again." Ben checked the clock. It was past midnight. "She'll need surgery soon if she's going to keep those pups." Helen nodded. "We'll figure it out. We always do." She reached down and rested her palm gently on Daisy's neck. "You made it to the right door, sweetheart." The shepherd's eyes fluttered open, cloudy but alive. She looked from Helen to Amy to Ben, as if memorizing the shapes that meant safety. Thunder rumbled again outside, fading into a distant growl. Helen stood, wiped her hands on her jeans, and looked over the sleeping dog. "No matter what it takes," she said quietly. "We're not letting her die tonight." The lights flickered once more, and for a moment it seemed the whole town held its breath. Morning in Oak Ridge broke slow and heavy, as if the storm had wrung the color out of the sky. The air still smelled of wet asphalt and pine sap, and puddles mirrored the gray rooftops. Inside Oak Ridge Animal Rescue, the hum of machines filled the silence, the oxygen unit beside Daisy's bed, the old refrigerator cycling on and off. Daisy slept on a thick blanket near the space heater, her breathing shallow but steady. Her coat, once matted and streaked with mud, now showed hints of the deep bronze beneath the black. Her belly rose and fell in uneven rhythm, still swollen, still dangerous. Helen Carter had not slept. She sat in a folding chair beside Daisy, coffee gone cold in her hand, the lines under her eyes drawn deeper by fluorescent light. Responsibility weighed on her like a wet coat. In 30 years of rescuing animals, she had seen cruelty in all its forms, starvation, neglect, abandonment. But there was something about Daisy's wounds that bothered her. They were precise, surgical, not the random damage of a stray, but the kind left by people who used animals like tools. Across the room, Amy Carter typed furiously at her laptop. Her hair, still tangled from sleep, was tied into a bun that leaned dangerously to one side. She had posted Daisy's story on the shelter's social media page at sunrise. "Pregnant police dog rescued in the storm, fighting for her life. Help us save her and her puppies." Within hours, the post had been shared thousands of times. Donations began to appear, $10 from a teacher in Ohio, $50 from a veteran in Montana, $1,000 from a woman in California who simply wrote, "For Daisy, who deserves a second chance." Amy's phone buzzed non-stop, the sound equal parts hope and exhaustion. "Mom," she said softly, looking up. "We've already hit $4,000. People are still donating." Helen's lips tightened into something close to a smile. "That's a start. But surgery and recovery, we'll need at least double that." She stood, stretched her stiff legs, and poured more coffee. "Ben's gone to town for supplies. We'll stabilize her, and when we've got the funds, we'll move her to Dr. Patel's clinic in Harrisburg for the procedure." Before Amy could answer, the shelter's front bell chimed. Not the quick, hesitant ring of a visitor, but a deliberate, confident push. Helen frowned. Few people came this early unless it was bad news. The door opened to reveal a woman in her early 70s, elegant and untouchable, like someone who'd learned how to make the world pause for her. Evelyn Grant entered in a cloud of expensive perfume and damp linen. She was tall, her posture a straight line from years of Pilates and privilege. Her silver blonde hair was styled into a perfect wave that hadn't dared frizz in the morning humidity. Diamond studs glittered at her ears, and a white silk scarf looped gracefully around her neck. Helen knew her immediately. Everyone in Oak Ridge did. Evelyn Grant, widow of industrial magnate Walter Grant, was the face of the Grant Foundation for Animal Welfare, a charity known as much for its glossy fundraising galas as for the mysterious gaps in its financial reports. She smiled, the kind of smile that never quite touched her pale blue eyes. "Mrs. Carter," she said, her voice honeyed and calm. "I saw the story about your dog on social media. So tragic and so inspiring. Oak Ridge is lucky to have people like you." Helen set down her coffee. "Thank you, Mrs. Grant. We're doing our best." Evelyn glanced around the modest lobby, the chipped tile, the mismatched chairs, the corkboard cluttered with adoption flyers, and smiled tighter. "I can imagine how difficult it must be to keep such a place running. I'd like to help." Amy, ever hopeful, straightened in her chair. "You mean a donation?" Evelyn reached into her designer handbag and withdrew a sleek checkbook. "Let's say $10,000 to cover this poor creature's medical expenses. I only ask one thing in return: to observe her care personally. I have a particular interest in police dogs. Such noble creatures." Helen studied her face. The offer was tempting. Too tempting, but something in the woman's tone made her uneasy. She wasn't asking for updates or pictures. She wanted proximity, control. "I appreciate your generosity," Helen said carefully, "but we have strict health protocols. Daisy's in isolation, and only staff can be near her." Evelyn's expression remained pleasant, but her eyes hardened. "Surely an exception can be made for the largest donor your shelter has ever seen." She began writing the check, her pen gliding with quiet authority. The front door slammed open before Helen could answer. A rush of cold air blew through the lobby, scattering papers. A tall man stood in the doorway, rain still dripping from his leather jacket. His face was a map of scars, puckered tissue climbing from his jaw to his temple, and one eye was clouded white from an old burn. Jack Miller, 40, once a K-9 handler for Oak Ridge Police, now looked more ghost than man. His hair was cropped short, peppered with gray, and a 2-day beard shadowed his strong, weathered jaw. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from fury barely contained. "Where is she?" His voice was rough, broken glass dragged over gravel. "The dog, the shepherd you brought in last night." Helen stepped forward, instinctively protective. "Sir, this is a private facility. You can't just—" He cut her off. "That dog is mine, Daisy. You have no idea what you're dealing with." Amy rose, startled. "You know her?" Jack's one good eye softened for the briefest moment. "I trained her. For 3 years. She was my partner. Until they took her from me." His gaze slid toward Evelyn Grant, and his jaw tightened. "And she knows exactly what I mean." Evelyn's composure didn't falter. "Mr. Miller," she said smoothly, "I wasn't aware you were still in Oak Ridge. I heard you were retired." "Retired," he spat, "is what they call it when a man loses everything and starts asking questions they don't like." Helen looked between them, her gut twisting. "Someone want to tell me what's going on here?" Jack's breathing quickened. 3 years ago, a raid went sideways. Daisy and I were on scene. Explosion tore through the house. My wife and daughter were inside. His voice cracked on the word daughter. "They said Daisy died, but I never believed it. Then last night I see her face all over the internet. Your shelter, Mrs. Carter. And I knew she'd come home." He pointed at Evelyn. "And this woman knows why she ran." Evelyn turned to Helen, her politeness a weapon. You don't have to listen to this, Mrs. Carter. Mr. Miller has emotional difficulties. The department relieved him after several incidents. Jack took a step closer, his fists trembling. You shut your mouth. You funded that operation, didn't you? You and your charity. You turned K9 units into mules for your shipments. Enough. Helen's voice cut through the air like a whip. Everyone take a breath. No one's accusing anyone of anything in my building. She turned to Jack. You say you're her handler. Do you have proof? He reached into his jacket and pulled out an ID badge. Burned at the edges, the plastic bubbled but still legible. It read Officer Jack Miller, Oak Ridge PD K9 Unit. Beneath the name was a small photo of Daisy, younger, her ears pricked, her gaze alert. Amy's voice trembled. That's her. Helen studied the badge, then looked at Daisy through the window of the recovery room. The same scar on the ear, the same steady eyes. It was her. Evelyn's smile faltered for the first time. You can't possibly believe this man's delusions. He's unstable. Dangerous. Jack's reply came low and steady. Dangerous is what made me survive. Helen folded her arms. Maybe we should let the police sort this out. No, Jack said sharply. The police won't help. Half of them are in her pocket. He glared at Evelyn. If you care about that dog, keep her safe. There are people who'd rather she didn't wake up. Evelyn turned towards the door, regaining her poise. Mrs. Carter, I'll be back later with the donation. Perhaps you'll be in a more cooperative mood. Her heels clicked sharply as she left, rain swallowing her figure beyond the glass. Silence followed, thick as fog. Helen looked at Jack. You'd better start explaining. Jack's shoulders sagged, the fight momentarily gone. I will, he said quietly. But not here. Not where they can hear. Outside, thunder muttered again, distant but returning. The storm had finally passed, but the air in Oak Ridge still clung to the smell of electricity and wet soil. Clouds hung low, bruised and heavy, as if reluctant to move on. Inside Oak Ridge Animal Rescue, time had stopped meaning anything. Machines hummed, lights buzzed, and every sound seemed to echo off the cement walls like a countdown no one wanted to hear. On the examination table lay Daisy, motionless except for the trembling of her sides. Her breathing came shallow and ragged. Each exhale carried a weak, wet rasp that made even the air around her feel fragile. The IV line pulsed slowly, a thin lifeline between her and the inevitable. The monitors flickered, reading vitals that dipped lower with every passing minute. Her gums were pale, almost chalk white. The smell of iron filled the room, a mixture of blood and fear. Helen Carter leaned over her, exhaustion carving shadows beneath her eyes. Her once steady hands trembled now as she pressed gauze against a reopened wound near Daisy's abdomen. Helen had seen dying animals before, too many, but this felt different. There was purpose behind this suffering, something deliberate. She could feel it. At the counter, Ben Parker hunched over a small blood sample beneath the flickering light of a portable microscope. His hair, dark and damp from the lingering humidity, stuck to his forehead as he adjusted the focus. His jaw was locked tight, the muscle twitching as he muttered under his breath. This doesn't make sense. What doesn't? Helen asked without looking up. He glanced at her, eyes sharp and tense. The viscosity's wrong. Look at this. He angled the slide toward her. The blood cells clung together in clusters, tiny shimmering flecks swimming among them. That's not natural. Looks synthetic, like a coating, maybe a polymer. Helen frowned. You think someone put this in her? Ben nodded grimly. Could be. I've seen things like this in hazmat training, used to wrap or hide microcomponents. But why inside a dog? Before Helen could answer, the front door rattled violently. Both froze. The last time someone had burst in unannounced, it had been Jack Miller. This time it wasn't fury that entered, but authority. A tall man in a damp, state-issued jacket stepped through, shaking off the rain. The silver badge clipped to his chest read, State Inspector, Animal Welfare Division. Mrs. Carter? His tone carried the dry weariness of someone used to arriving where they weren't wanted. Helen straightened, wiping her hands on her apron. That's me. You're here awfully early. He flipped open a small notebook. Got a call about unauthorized surgery. Said you've been performing medical procedures without a licensed vet. Helen's heart sank. We're stabilizing an injured rescue. Nothing more. The man's eyes swept the room, pausing on the blood, the IVs, the surgical tools laid out on trays. His expression softened slightly. He wasn't just another bureaucrat. He looked like someone who'd seen too much paperwork about cruelty and too few acts of compassion. His name tag read, Inspector David Hall. He looked to be in his mid-40s, with a face weathered by long days and bad coffee. His short-cropped hair was flecked with gray, and faint scars peeked from under his collar, the kind that told old stories of blue-collar work before government jobs. Helen met his gaze squarely. You can write me up if you need to, but I'm not letting her die on the floor. He studied her for a long moment, then sighed and shut his notebook. You've got 1 hour, he said quietly. I haven't seen anything yet. After that, I have to file my report. Helen blinked, unsure whether to thank him or cry. That's all I need. Without another word, he stepped aside, taking position near the door, as if keeping watch. Ben returned to the microscope, muttering, 1 hour. That's generous, if she lasts that long. Daisy twitched, her paws trembling as if chasing something in a dream. Amy, who had been hovering quietly in the corner, hurried to her side. She's trying to move, the girl whispered. Helen knelt, stroking the shepherd's muzzle. Easy, sweetheart. You stay with us. The dog's eyes flickered open for a moment, glazed with pain but aware. She tried to lift her head and failed. Helen could almost feel the effort it took. She's losing blood faster than the IV can replace it, she murmured. If we don't find a way to clot it, we'll lose her. Ben scanned the shelves. We're out of O-negative plasma. Closest vet with supply is Harrisburg, 2 hours minimum. Too far, Helen said. Her mind raced. Ben, grab the adrenaline kit. Amy, start boiling saline. Clean towels, too. Amy jumped to action, her sneakers squeaking across the tile. Her face was pale, jaw tight, but her hands were steady. She had learned composure from her mother. What if we can't stop it? Helen didn't look up. Then we'll make her comfortable. But I'm not done fighting yet. The shelter's old generator buzzed as the power flickered again. The storm might have moved on, but the grid hadn't forgiven the night. Shadows jumped along the walls as Helen worked, stitching a torn vessel with the calm urgency of someone who'd made impossible choices before. Outside the operating area, Inspector Hall watched quietly. His eyes softened as he saw the team move in perfect rhythm. Helen's steady hands, Ben's rough competence, Amy's silent precision. He'd inspected hundreds of facilities, but he'd never seen devotion like this. Then Amy's phone buzzed again. She ignored it once, twice, then glanced down and froze. Mom, she said, our live stream, it's blowing up. Helen frowned. What live stream? I started one last night. Help save Daisy. I left it running. People are watching right now. Ben groaned. You're telling me we're on camera? With a state inspector in the room? Hall raised a hand. Relax, I told you, I didn't see anything. Amy turned the phone around. The screen showed thousands of viewers flooding the comment section with messages. Praying for her. Stay strong, Daisy. Where do we donate? The donation counter climbed faster than she could read it. Helen's voice softened. They're still watching? Amy nodded, her voice trembling. All over the state. Ben gave a low whistle. Looks like the whole damn internet wants this dog to live. Helen exhaled slowly, eyes fixed on Daisy. Then let's not disappoint them. Minutes passed like seconds. The shelter felt suspended between hope and exhaustion. Helen worked methodically, clamping vessels, pressing gauze, whispering quiet reassurances to the unconscious shepherd. Every so often, Daisy's legs twitched as if she were remembering something. Running, chasing, maybe even saving someone. Ben checked the vitals. Pressure's stabilizing a little. Good, Helen said. Keep fluids running at half rate. Amy hovered by the phone, narrating softly for the live stream. Daisy's heart rate is rising. She's still fighting. Every donation helps us keep her alive. Through the camera, thousands watched. Teachers, veterans, teenagers, nurses. Some cried, others typed prayers or offered medical advice. For one brief moment, a small-town shelter had become a battlefield for hope. Then the monitor beeped. Flat, piercing, merciless. Helen froze. She's crashing! Ben grabbed the defibrillator pads. No charge left. Battery's dead. Manual compressions, Helen ordered. Now! Ben pressed his hands against Daisy's ribs, counting under his breath. Helen injected adrenaline straight into the vein. Come on, Daisy, come back to me. Amy's tears streaked her face as she whispered into the camera. Please, don't give up on her. For 30 seconds, there was nothing. Then Daisy's chest jerked. Once, twice. The monitor blipped, a faint but steady pulse. The sound sent a wave of cheers across the live stream chat. She's back, Ben said hoarsely. Helen sagged against the table, sweat streaking her face. She's back, she echoed softly. Amy wiped her eyes and smiled through the tears. Mom, we just passed 20,000 in donations. Helen looked at Daisy, at the dog who refused to die, and whispered, Looks like the world's decided she matters. From the doorway, Inspector Hall cleared his throat. Your hour's up, Mrs. Carter, he said gently. But for what it's worth, I didn't see a damn thing. He tipped his hat and left, the door closing behind him like the end of a prayer. Helen sat beside Daisy, stroking her paw. Rest, sweetheart. You've done enough for one day. Outside, the clouds finally began to break, and sunlight bled through in thin gold lines. The storm returned without warning, louder than before. Rain lashed against the roof of Oak Ridge Animal Rescue in furious waves, and thunder cracked like the sky was tearing itself open. Inside, the shelter flickered with dying light as the power grid gave up. The overhead bulbs went dark, leaving only the rhythmic pulse of the backup generator humming somewhere deep in the basement. It sputtered once, twice, then caught again. Weak, uncertain, but alive. Helen Carter stood at the center of the operating room, her hair damp and clinging to her temples. The sleeves of her denim shirt rolled high past her elbows. Sweat and rainwater mixed on her brow as she wiped it away with the back of her arm. Around her, the air was thick with tension, the metallic scent of blood, disinfectant, and the damp ozone leaking in from cracked windows. Daisy lay still on the table beneath a dim, portable lamp, her chest rising in uneven rhythm. The monitor beside her blinked weakly, its numbers fading in and out with every cough from the generator. Ben, keep that light steady, Helen ordered, her voice low but steady. Ben Parker adjusted the flashlight, his rough hands trembling from fatigue. The former firefighter's shirt was soaked through, clinging to the scarred muscles of his arms. He had been awake for nearly 30 hours, yet he moved with the stubborn resolve of a man who refused to lose another life on his watch. Across the room, Amy Carter filmed with her phone, her small hands gripping it tightly, the flashlight attachment casting a pale circle of light over Daisy's body. Her face was ghostly under the glow, her eyes red from crying but determined. "Mom," she whispered, "the live stream's still going. We have 20,000 people watching." Helen didn't answer. She couldn't think about the world outside these walls, only the one that hung in this small room between life and death. The generator coughed again. Lights flickered, dimmed, then steadied. "If that thing dies," Ben muttered. "So does she." Before Helen could respond, the phone on the counter buzzed. The caller ID flashed Evelyn Grant. Helen hesitated for a moment, then answered. "Mrs. Carter?" Evelyn's voice purred through the line, smooth and cold. "How is our patient?" Helen's jaw tightened. "She's not ours, Mrs. Grant. She's an animal fighting for her life. And unless you have a medical license or something useful to offer, I don't have time for—" "Be careful what you say, dear," Evelyn interrupted, her tone sharpening. "You're on a very public stage. Mistakes can be expensive." The line went dead. Outside the shelter, parked beneath the hammering rain, a sleek black SUV idled quietly. Inside sat two men in dark suits. One, clean-cut with a narrow scar on his chin, held a phone pressed to his ear. "She hung up," he said flatly. Beside him, a larger man with a shaved head cracked his knuckles. His neck bore the faint outline of military tattoos. "Doesn't matter. Orders are the same. We get what's inside the dog before morning." "Understood," the first man said, pocketing his phone. "Mrs. Grant wants her package back." Back inside, the air grew heavier. The first contraction hit Daisy like a lightning strike. She let out a low, guttural whine, her legs twitching weakly. Helen's heart jumped. "She's going into labor," she said. "Ben, get more towels. Amy, keep filming. We'll need to review this later if things go wrong." Amy nodded shakily, adjusting the focus. Rain drummed louder against the roof. The shelter seemed to shrink, time collapsing into heartbeats. Helen guided Daisy gently through the contractions, whispering encouragement like prayers. Minutes passed, like hours. The first puppy arrived, a tiny, limp body slick with blood and fluid. Helen rubbed it briskly with a towel, then bent close. No movement. No breath. She pressed her fingers to its tiny chest, massaging. Nothing. "The first one's not breathing," she said hoarsely. Ben's flashlight trembled. "Try another." The second, third, fourth, each one lifeless, each attempt ending with Helen's hands shaking harder. Amy cried silently, her camera still rolling, whispering, "Please, please, wake up." Daisy's breathing grew shallow, her pupils dilated, unfocused. Helen leaned closer, her voice breaking. "Stay with me, girl. You don't quit now." Then Daisy's body arched once, a sharp cry escaping her throat, and she went still. The monitor flatlined. "No," Helen gasped. "Not yet, not her." She began chest compressions, pressing with both hands, counting under her breath. Ben injected adrenaline into the vein, his jaw set in grim determination. Amy sobbed, clutching the phone, streaming everything live. Her mother's voice, the thunder outside, the hopeless rhythm of desperate hearts refusing to stop. Outside, the SUV's doors opened. The two men stepped into the rain, coats pulled tight, moving toward the back entrance of the shelter. But before they reached the door, red and blue lights erupted across the flooded street. Police cruisers screeched to a stop, sirens slicing through the storm. Federal agents poured out, weapons drawn, shouting orders. The men froze. One reached for his gun. He never got the chance. The first agent tackled him into the mud, while another slammed the second against the SUV's hood. Inside the shelter, the back door burst open. Helen spun around, startled, as a tall man in tactical gear stepped in, rain streaming off his shoulders. He pulled down his hood, and the sight made Helen's breath catch. "Ryan," she whispered. Her son. The son she had buried in her heart years ago when the Army told her his patrol had gone missing overseas. Agent Ryan Carter, 35, stood before her, older and harder than she remembered. His brown hair was cropped short, his face lean, jaw covered in a few days' stubble. His green eyes, her eyes, held both sorrow and focus. He wore a bulletproof vest marked DEA and carried the weary confidence of someone who'd seen too much war to believe in happy endings. "Mom," he said quietly, "step back from the table." Helen's mind reeled. "What? How?" "Later," he said. "We have a situation. Evelyn Grant's operation's been under federal surveillance for 2 years. We've been tracking illegal shipments, narcotics, and encrypted data moved through animal couriers." He nodded toward Daisy. "She was one of them." Helen shook her head in disbelief. "You're telling me she was used to smuggle drugs?" Ryan's expression darkened. "Not just drugs. Data capsules, coated in polymer, invisible to scanners. We found traces in her blood from a tracking analysis we intercepted last week." Ben stared. "That's what I saw under the microscope." Before Ryan could continue, an officer approached. "Sir, we have Mrs. Grant in custody. She was trying to flee town." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Get her in interrogation. No one talks to her until I'm there." Amy lowered her phone slowly, the live stream still rolling but forgotten. "You knew about all this?" she asked in a small voice. Ryan hesitated, guilt flickering across his face. "I couldn't tell anyone. The operation was classified. Grant's foundation was laundering money and smuggling data for cartel clients. We didn't know she'd involve animals until Daisy turned up." Helen looked down at Daisy's still body. Her voice cracked. "And now she's dead because of it." Ryan glanced at the monitor and froze. A faint blip. Then another. "She's not," he said softly. Helen looked up. Daisy's chest moved barely. Her tail twitched, the weak, impossible sound of life. Amy gasped. "She's breathing." Helen pressed a hand to the shepherd's neck. "Her pulse is faint, but it's there." Outside, lightning lit the sky, the rain easing to a soft drizzle. The power flickered back, restoring full light to the room. The 5 puppies lay motionless until one gave a small, trembling cry. Then another. Helen laughed through tears. "They're alive! 2 of them are breathing!" Ryan removed his vest and knelt beside his mother, helping her clear the table. "We'll get her to the Federal Vet Center in Pittsburgh. They can extract the capsules safely." Helen looked at her son, alive after all these years, and then at Daisy, fighting her way back from the edge. "You came back when we needed you most." Ryan smiled faintly. "Guess we both did." Behind them, the storm finally broke, the last drops fading into silence. Morning crept into Oak Ridge like a timid visitor after a night of violence. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and gleaming under a sky the color of tarnished silver. The town felt quiet again. Too quiet, like it was catching its breath after holding it all night. Inside Oak Ridge Animal Rescue, the fluorescent lights flickered back to life, humming with fragile stability. The smell of antiseptic mingled with the faint sweetness of wet hay and dog shampoo. It no longer felt like a rescue shelter. It felt like a battlefield after the smoke cleared. Helen Carter stood by Daisy's side, her palms pressed gently against the German shepherd's chest, feeling the rhythmic rise and fall that had seemed impossible hours ago. Daisy was alive. Her fur, once matted with blood, now glistened faintly under the light, and her body shuddered with each shallow breath. Near her, 6 newborn puppies nestled together beneath warm blankets, their tiny chests fluttering like candle flames. But not all was well. The smallest of the litter, an ivory-furred pup with a faint black streak down its spine, lay unusually still, its belly slightly distended. "Ryan," Helen whispered, her voice both fearful and maternal. "This one isn't right." Agent Ryan Carter turned from where he stood by the counter, flipping through paperwork left behind by the DEA team. In the harsh light, he looked older than his 35 years. His face was lean, sharp around the jawline, and his green eyes, his mother's eyes, had that glassy weariness of a man who'd seen too many lives slip through his hands. He wore a black field jacket now instead of tactical armor, sleeves rolled up, revealing scars that ran pale across his forearms. War had carved him into something deliberate, careful, and perpetually tired. He approached the table, his voice calm but clipped. "Show me." Helen lifted the tiny pup into her hands. "He's breathing, but something's lodged inside him. Feel that?" Ryan pressed his thumb gently against the puppy's abdomen, then frowned. "Metallic density," he murmured. "I can feel the edges." "Could it be a bullet fragment?" Ben asked from behind, leaning against a metal cabinet, arms folded. His tired eyes darted between Daisy and the pup, his protective instinct for both evident. Ryan shook his head. "No, smaller. Uniform shape. That's not shrapnel. It's deliberate." He glanced toward his team outside the window, federal agents cataloging evidence, collecting samples, photographing every inch of the shelter. Then he looked back at Helen. "This confirms it." "Confirms what?" Amy asked, stepping closer. Her young face was pale from exhaustion, but alive with curiosity and dread. Ryan exhaled slowly. "Daisy was part of a DEA sting 2 years ago. We were tracking Evelyn Grant's trafficking network. Her foundation was a front for smuggling. Drugs, yes, but more dangerously, encrypted data, encrypted memory, drives the size of fingernails coated in polymer so they wouldn't show up on scanners. Evelyn used trained animals as couriers." Helen's stomach twisted. "And Daisy? She was one of them?" Ryan nodded grimly. "She was part of a raid at one of Grant's properties outside Pittsburgh, a drug warehouse with a data transfer station inside. During the firefight, one of the couriers, a shepherd named Rex, was shot, and Daisy went for the man who did it. She saved 3 officers that day, but she was injured in the explosion. Somewhere in that chaos, she must have swallowed a capsule before escaping." Amy looked down at the sleeping puppies. "And when she got pregnant?" "The capsule migrated," Ryan finished. "When the embryos formed, the microdevices transferred into their systems through shared blood flow. At least one of these pups carries it now." Ben rubbed a hand across his jaw, the rough scrape of stubble audible in the silence. "And that's what Evelyn wanted back." Ryan's expression hardened. "Exactly. Those drives hold financial data, client names, offshore accounts, government contacts, enough to bring down half her network." From the hallway, footsteps echoed. The shelter door opened, and Detective Sarah Quinn entered, shaking rain from her coat. She was in her late 30s, tall and athletic, with auburn hair pulled into a tight bun and freckles across her fair skin. Her sharp blue eyes missed nothing. Once a small-town officer, Sarah had transferred to the federal task force 3 years prior, trading routine patrols for the uglier parts of human nature. She had a reputation for being fearless and stubborn, qualities that often left her superiors exhausted. "Evelyn Grant is officially in custody," she announced, flipping open her notepad. "She's not talking, of course, keeps saying she'll only deal with her lawyers. But the evidence from her car matches what we've got here. Syringes, polymer casings, and encrypted tags. Her gaze fell on the sleeping Daisy. "Is she stable?" "Barely," Helen said softly. "But she's fighting." Sarah stepped closer, her tone gentler now. "Then she's stronger than most people I've met." Ryan crossed his arms. "We need that capsule out of the puppy before the wrong people find out it's here. If Grant's associates realize Daisy's alive, they'll come." Helen bristled. "You're not cutting open that baby." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Mom, this isn't about one animal anymore. This is evidence that could dismantle an entire criminal enterprise. People died for this data." Helen's voice rose. "And I've watched enough living things die in this room to know we don't trade one life for another. There has to be another way." Sarah interjected calmly. "He's right that the data matters. But she's right that there's time. We can x-ray the pup first, confirm which one carries it. No surgery unless absolutely necessary." Ryan nodded reluctantly. "Agreed. We'll use the mobile scanner from the van." Ben pushed himself off the wall. "I'll prep the area, and maybe someone should get that generator checked before it kills over again." Sarah managed a tired half-smile. "You really think they're done with us?" Outside, agents loaded Evelyn into a black SUV. Even in handcuffs, she carried herself like royalty. Her platinum hair was soaked, makeup streaked, but her smile, cold and condescending, never faltered. She caught sight of the camera flash and turned slightly, as if posing for one last portrait. Inside, Ryan set up the portable X-ray unit while Helen watched over Daisy and her pups. The scanner whirred softly, its light tracing across the blanket. The screen flickered, revealing 6 tiny skeletons. For 5 of them, everything looked normal. But the 6th showed a distinct glint, a small metallic oval near the stomach. "There," Ryan said quietly. "That's our capsule." Helen stared at the image. The puppy let out a small whimper and curled against Daisy's leg. "If we take it out, will he survive?" Sarah answered softly. "If it's done carefully, yes. We'll bring in a federal vet from Pittsburgh. He's experienced with this kind of operation." Ryan lowered his voice. "Mom, this dog saved lives. What's in her and her puppies could save thousands more." Helen nodded slowly, tears brimming. "Then we'll save them all, every last one." For the first time in hours, the shelter felt still. Daisy stirred slightly, her paw twitching against the blanket as if sensing the conversation around her. Her eyes opened, faint amber glimmers beneath half-closed lids. She lifted her head weakly, nudging her puppies closer with the gentleness of a soldier guarding her unit. Ryan smiled faintly. "That's one hell of a dog." Helen reached down, stroking Daisy's fur. "She's more than that. She's proof that no matter how much darkness people carry, there's still something good that fights its way out." Outside, the dawn broke through the clouds, washing the shelter in pale gold. For the first time, the world seemed to breathe again. The morning sun rose clear for the first time in weeks, spilling gold over the quiet streets of Oak Ridge. The storm had washed everything clean. Rooftops glistened, puddles reflected the soft blue sky, and the pine trees shimmered with raindrops that looked like glass beads. The town, small and often forgotten, felt reborn. A faint breeze carried the smell of wet soil and coffee from the diner across Main Street, where people gathered to talk about the only thing anyone seemed to care about anymore: the dog that refused to die. At Oak Ridge Animal Rescue, OAR, life had returned in cautious, grateful rhythms. The once cluttered lobby now buzzed with volunteers unpacking boxes of supplies sent from all over the country: blankets, food, medicine, even toys wrapped in notes from children. A hand-painted banner hung near the front door. "Thank you, Daisy. You saved more than you know." Inside the recovery room, Helen Carter stood by Daisy's bed. Her silver-streaked hair was tied back neatly, her tired eyes softened by pride. Daisy lay curled with her 6 puppies, who had doubled in size over the past week. They wriggled and yipped playfully, their small tails wagging like sparks of life. Daisy, though still thin, had regained her strength. Her coat gleamed again in hues of bronze and black, and her once wounded gaze now carried calm. Trust rediscovered. Helen reached down, brushing a hand over Daisy's head. "You did it, girl," she whispered. "You really did." From the hallway, Amy Carter appeared, holding a tablet. "Mom, you have to see this," she said, her voice bubbling with disbelief. Helen followed her to the small office where Ben Parker sat, surrounded by stacks of mail and donation receipts. His rugged face, lined from years of smoke and loss as a retired firefighter, was uncharacteristically bright. He was a large man, broad-shouldered, with dark hair graying at the edges and hands calloused like tree bark. But when he smiled, the years seemed to fall away. On the screen, a national news anchor was speaking, her polished tone barely hiding emotion. The story of Daisy, the German shepherd who survived a criminal trafficking ring and saved vital federal evidence, has captured hearts nationwide. Donations have poured into the Oak Ridge Animal Rescue, now exceeding $50,000 in under a week. The shelter has become a symbol of hope and community restoration. The camera cut to footage of Daisy and her pups, filmed the day before by a local reporter. Helen stood in the background, hair wind-blown, eyes tired yet proud. Amy grinned beside her, and Ben's large figure loomed protectively near the doorway. "Mom," Amy said softly, "people from all 50 states have donated. Even someone from Canada offered to adopt one of Daisy's puppies." Helen chuckled, shaking her head. "They'll have to wait. They're still too young to leave their mother." Ben leaned back in his chair. "And speaking of waiting," the county office called. "We've got mail." He handed Helen an envelope stamped with the state seal. Helen tore it open carefully, her hands steady even as her heart raced. She read silently, then looked up with a quiet, incredulous laugh. "They've extended our license. 6 more months to rebuild operations." Amy let out a squeal, throwing her arms around her mother. "We did it!" Ben grinned. "You did it, all of you." Helen's eyes softened. "No, Ben. Daisy did." The office door opened, and Jack Miller stepped in, hat in hand. Clean-shaven now and wearing a pressed denim jacket, he looked like a man who'd been given his life back. His scars were still visible, running along his cheek and temple, but they no longer seemed to define him. He carried himself differently, taller, lighter, free. "Morning," he said, his voice rough but calm. "Heard the good news." Helen smiled warmly. "Jack, I'm glad you came." He nodded. "The DA dropped the charges yesterday. Said the evidence you turned in cleared everything. Guess I'm officially not a monster anymore." Ben stood and offered his hand. "About damn time, brother." Jack shook it firmly. "I owe you all more than I can ever repay." His gaze fell on Daisy, resting nearby. But mostly her. He crouched beside the shepherd, scratching gently behind her ear. "She was trained to protect, but she saved us all from something worse than bullets." Daisy wagged her tail softly, resting her head on his knee. From the corner of the room, Ryan entered quietly, now out of uniform, wearing a simple gray flannel shirt. He looked tired but content, a rare calmness in his posture. He had decided to stay in Oak Ridge for a while, officially on leave, unofficially to rebuild what he'd lost. "Seems like we're not just saving animals anymore," Ryan said with a faint smile. Ben looked around the room, nodding slowly. "That's what I've been saying." Helen raised a brow. "Oh? Enlighten us, philosopher." Ben chuckled, leaning forward on the table. You see, we didn't just pull Daisy out of the storm. We pulled an entire town out of its darkness. People were scared, divided, tired. Now they've got something to believe in again, a reason to show up, to care, to fight for something that matters. He gestured towards the window, where volunteers were unloading donations. That's what this is about. There was a moment of silence, warm and heavy with meaning. Then Helen smiled. Then let's make sure we deserve that faith. Later that afternoon, they gathered in the courtyard behind the shelter for a small press event. Reporters, townsfolk, and volunteers stood under strings of lights hung hastily between trees. The air smelled of coffee, wet pine, and hope. A wooden sign at the center read, OAR Community Day, because every life matters. Helen stepped up to the microphone. Her hands shook slightly, but her voice was clear. When Daisy arrived here, she was broken, hurt, lost, and alone. We all were, in our own ways. But through her, we remembered what compassion looks like. We remembered that mercy isn't weakness, it's courage. Applause rippled through the crowd. Ryan stood near the back, his arms crossed, watching his mother with quiet admiration. Amy filmed every second, her face glowing with pride. Helen continued, We don't know what tomorrow brings, but I know this. Oak Ridge will never forget what one dog and a handful of stubborn people did when the world went dark. We don't just rescue animals here. We rescue faith in each other. Ben stepped up beside her, his deep voice echoing over the speakers. We didn't just save dogs, he said. We saved a community from its own shadows. The crowd erupted in applause, and Daisy barked once, sharp, proud, almost like a salute. Jack smiled from the front row, tears glinting in his eyes. Ryan placed a hand on his shoulder. Amy leaned against her mother, whispering, She's our miracle, isn't she? Helen nodded, eyes wet. Yes, sweetheart. She's proof that even after the darkest storm, light always finds its way back. The camera lights dimmed, the applause faded into laughter and conversation, and the evening settled gently over Oak Ridge. Daisy lay beneath the table, her puppies curled beside her, their tiny bodies rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Somewhere beyond the hills, the last streak of sunset glowed orange and gold, a promise that peace had finally come home. Summer came to Oak Ridge with warmth that felt almost unreal after the long winter and storms. The pine trees shimmered green again, children played barefoot on porches, and the scent of cut grass mingled with the laughter echoing through the valley. For the first time in years, the small town didn't feel forgotten. It felt alive. And at the heart of that renewal stood a place that only months ago had been one power outage away from closing forever: Oak Ridge Animal Rescue. The shelter gleamed under the afternoon sun. A new wooden sign, hand-carved by local craftsmen, read, Oak Ridge Animal Rescue, where hope has a home. Flower beds bloomed around the fence, tended by volunteers who had once been strangers, but now stopped by every week to lend a hand. Helen had insisted the old, creaky front door remain unpainted, a reminder of where it all began. Inside, the once dim and broken facility now buzzed with life. Clean kennels lined the hall, the air filled with the soft barks and chirps of rescued animals waiting for new homes. But at the center of it all, lying in a sunlit pen surrounded by people, was the one who had changed everything: Daisy. She looked stronger now, her coat thick and glossy, her eyes sharp and gentle all at once. Scars still marked her body, faint reminders of what she had survived, but her spirit was whole. Around her, 6 pups tumbled over one another in chaotic joy, a blur of tan, cream, and black fur, their tails wagging like metronomes of happiness. Each one had a name, carefully chosen by the people who had fought for their lives. Hope, the firstborn, was bold and curious, always the first to explore and the last to rest. Faith, calm and observant, had a black patch shaped like a cross between her shoulders. Courage, slightly larger than the others, had a protective streak, often standing between his siblings when strangers approached. Amy, the smallest female, had bright amber eyes like her namesake, and a streak of mischief that made everyone laugh. Ben, sturdy and confident, carried himself with the same steady patience as his human counterpart. And Miracle, the runt who had once been lifeless in Helen's hands, now bounced with endless energy, his fur catching the light like gold threads in the sun. What fascinated everyone most was what happened when the 6 of them stood together in a circle. Their dark markings along the spine formed the shape of a perfect heart. The first time it happened, Amy had gasped, and even Ben, who'd seen enough tragedy to stop believing in signs, had gone silent for a moment. "Guess the universe has a sense of humor," he'd said, but the glint in his eye betrayed something softer: belief. That morning, Helen Carter stood by the pen, her hands resting on the fence as she watched Daisy and her pups playing with a group of elderly visitors from Silver Pine's senior home. The new therapy program, Paws of Grace, had been her idea, inspired by Daisy's story, and the letters they'd received from across the country. The program paired rescued animals with seniors living alone or in assisted facilities, using the dog's calm affection to heal loneliness that no medicine could touch. Across the courtyard, Ryan Carter adjusted the camera equipment for a news crew filming a feature story about OAR's recovery. Without the tactical vest and the grim look of a federal agent, he almost looked like the boy Helen remembered. Tall, broad-shouldered, his brown hair neatly trimmed, his sleeves rolled to the elbows as he worked. Yet the discipline of years in service still lingered in his movements, controlled, precise, quietly protective. "Camera's ready," he called out. "You sure you want to talk on record again?" Helen smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "After all this, I think I owe people a few words." Nearby, Jack Miller loaded supplies into the shelter's new therapy van, its sides painted with a mural of Daisy and her pups, surrounded by smiling seniors. Jack had traded his old police badge for a volunteer ID. The scars on his face had faded, and his once grim eyes now carried something he hadn't shown in years: peace. His uniform these days was a simple plaid shirt and jeans, his posture relaxed yet purposeful. There were days he still woke from dreams of fire and chaos, but Daisy's gentle nudges and the laughter of children at the shelter always pulled him back to the present. Ben walked over, carrying 2 crates of dog food with ease. "Careful, old man," he teased. "Don't pull something before the event starts." Jack laughed. "You're one to talk, firefighter. I saw you groaning just from bending over the food bin yesterday." Amy giggled from where she was decorating a table with paper hearts. "You two argue like an old married couple." Helen turned from the pen. "Don't encourage them, Amy. The last thing I need is another pair of loudmouths trying to run this place." Laughter rippled through the courtyard. The warmth in the air wasn't just from the summer sun. It came from something deeper, something rebuilt through shared pain and purpose. A small bus pulled into the driveway, and Eleanor Reeves, the activities coordinator from Silver Pines, stepped out. She was in her mid-60s, petite and cheerful, with curly gray hair and a laugh that could fill a room. Her bright floral dress and sunflower earrings made her look like she carried summer wherever she went. "All right, my friends," she called out, clapping her hands. "Who's ready to meet their therapy buddies again?" The seniors shuffled out slowly, some with walkers, others in wheelchairs, their faces lighting up as the dogs ran toward them. Hope climbed gently onto one woman's lap. Faith nuzzled against a man's trembling hand, and Miracle, always the performer, barked happily, spinning in circles that made the crowd laugh. Ryan captured every moment through his camera lens, his expression softening with each frame. He turned to Helen. "You realize this is going viral again, right? You're going to have volunteers from California showing up any day now." Helen smiled. "Then we'd better build more kennels." Under the old oak tree, Ben gathered everyone for a small meeting before the event wrapped up. "All right, team," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "I've been thinking a lot these past few weeks. What we've done here, it's more than rebuilding a shelter. It's rebuilding trust. We didn't just save Daisy or her pups. We reminded people that kindness still matters, that compassion isn't weakness." Jack nodded in agreement. "You're right. This place isn't about animals anymore. It's about second chances. For them, for us, for everyone who ever thought they were too broken to start again." Helen looked around the circle. At Ryan, the son she thought she'd lost. At Amy, whose laughter had become the heartbeat of the shelter. At Ben and Jack, both scarred but smiling. And at Daisy, resting with her pups in the grass. The world had taken so much from each of them, yet somehow had given it back in ways they never expected. As the sun climbed higher, painting the world in shades of gold, Helen whispered more to herself than anyone else. Second chances aren't just for animals. They're for every heart that's ever been hurt. Ryan caught her words and smiled faintly. "Couldn't have said it better myself." The camera clicked one last time. Daisy, her 6 pups, and the humans whose lives she had changed, all framed in sunlight and peace. Later, as the seniors waved goodbye and the courtyard quieted, Helen stood at the doorway watching the dogs play in the grass. She closed her eyes, letting the warmth touch her face, and thought of all the storms that had passed. Not every wound could heal without scars, but maybe scars weren't meant to be hidden. Maybe they were proof that survival itself was a kind of grace. And as Daisy barked softly, calling her puppies to her side, the sound echoed across Oak Ridge. Not a cry, but a hymn of life continuing. Sometimes miracles don't come as thunder in the sky or voices from above. They come on 4 paws, with muddy fur and eyes that still believe in love after everything. Daisy's story reminds us that God's grace often hides in the quiet places, in kindness shared, in second chances given, in hearts that choose to heal instead of harden. If you've ever felt broken, lost, or forgotten, remember this. Every sunrise is proof that God isn't done writing your story yet. Miracles don't always happen in churches or hospitals. Sometimes they happen in a small shelter in Oak Ridge, or right inside your own home when you choose to love again. May God bless you, your family, and every creature that crosses your path. If Daisy's journey touched your heart today, share this story with someone who needs hope. Leave a comment below to tell us what this miracle means to you. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that restore faith, celebrate compassion, and remind us that no soul, human or animal, is ever too lost to be saved.